Hi, welcome to this new series on building a car race demo in WinForms. It's designed to showcase things like basic computer programming skills like creating classes, attributes, inheriting. Just a warning, generally you would not do a full-on graphics game with movement and stuff like that in WinForms. It's not really designed for it. We're just using it because it's a very quick platform to get some displays up on the screen without getting distracted with a whole bunch of other technologies. So we're going to be starting with WinForms. So we're on Visual Studio here. We're going to create a new project. And WinForms, the one with .NET Framework is the one you're after. Click on that. We're going to call this car, what do we call it? Car Racer 1.6. Okay, that's what we're calling it. So hopefully at the end of this demo, what I'll do is I'll save this up on GitHub. I'll put the link to the GitHub repository in the video. Okay, so let's add a button. Or WinForms need a button. And so the general idea is that we will have a label here, and it will travel across the screen. It will represent a car. And maybe in future videos, what we'll do is we'll have multiple labels representing different cars traveling at different speeds, and they can race amongst each other. A subsequent video to that might be creating a track that the cars could travel around on rather than just going in the positive X direction. So we've chosen a label because it's a nice rectangle. They don't always appear as nice rectangles, but you can make them rectangles by setting up some of the attributes or the properties. So some of the things that you will need to set would be like the background color. Maybe we would change that to something like a red, and we would change the size to let me have a look. Maybe we'll change the size to 100 by 30. And we have to set the auto size to false. By default, it's set to true. All right, and so we can see this is starting to come up. We'd set the text to my car, maybe the rego number. So maybe it'll be AAA111, something like that. All right, and so what we want is for this thing to travel across the screen once this button is clicked. That's what we want to accomplish. What we want to do, though, is we want to create this label inside the program itself, and we actually want it to be part of a class called car. So we don't want to create it by dragging it from the toolbox. We actually want to create it programmatically, and that's going to be our first step. So let's delete this button here, and let's create a class of car right at the beginning. So add class. And we're creating a class, so remember it starts with uppercase, calling it car. Generally, I change my classes to public. And then we're going to put some attributes in, properties. So if you remember, you type in prop tab once, and you get the data type. So I think we're just going to have a couple of really simple properties. The first one will be the rego number, and the second one will be the color. So let's store the rego number in a string, and we'll just call it rego. That's it. And prop again, tab. So this time we want to store the color. Now we're going to store that as type of system color or color. And we'll call the attribute paint color. So remember as well, because we have getters and setters, we should be starting our attributes with a capital. It's all very good. Now, one final thing we do really need is a timer. So what needs to happen is, even though we've deleted our label here, we need this label to move forward on a regular basis. So every second we need it to move forward so that we actually get some impression that the car's moving. So let's create a timer here. So let's go property again, tab, and this time we're going to go system.windows.forms.timer. And we're going to call it an update timer. So far, so good. So these are the three properties that I mainly want with my car. Now, at this stage, I can go Control full stop, and that will give me the option to generate a constructor, which I've selected there. I press Enter. Once I see this thing, I'm looking basically that all of these things are ticked, three things are ticked, and I just go OK. It generates the constructor method for us, which is very convenient. Now, what we'll need to do is we need to update the timer. So we need to say how often it will tick and what we do when it ticks, etc. So let's do that for a start. So let's put an extra part in the constructor to say this is what you do when the timer ticks. So let's update the timer attributes. So the first thing we obviously do is update timer dot and then interval. So interval is how often it ticks, and it suggests 1 second. Sounds good. Update timer dot enabled. Now we're going to make it not enabled to start with. We'll make it enabled later on when certain things have happened in the program. And the final thing we need to do is we need to go update timer dot, and we need to say what will happen, what's going to handle when the clock actually ticks, when the timer is actually up. And so what we do to do that is we type in update timer.tick and then we go plus equals, and you can see here it's prompting us, and we press tab, and what it generates is a handler, a method handler. So it's actually handling what will happen when this tick occurs. Now at the moment it's just throwing an exception, which isn't much good to us. So let's change this to a console write lines just so we can do some testing. All right, so we've just said I ticked and I am, and then it's going to reference the rego number, and it's going to put the date and time in, and that's all it's going to do. All right, this is all well and good, but at the moment we don't have any way of representing the car as a rectangular label on the form, and we need to do that. The way we do that is quite clever trick. We go up to the class statement where we're defining the car class, and all we have to do is type :label, and it does something pretty powerful. What happens is that it says inherit all of the attributes of a Windows form type of label. So if we were to add a label here, for instance, we now have all of these attributes added to our car class. You can't see them yet, but we'll use them in a minute. So that means our car class now has a border style, a background color, an auto size, all of this sort of stuff it inherits. Super important. All right, so what we need is to set up some of those attributes. So now let's set up. So the first obvious one would be the background color. So we can simply say background color now. So, oops, background color. And that is now an attribute of car. It was inherited from label, and we can set it directly. So we're going to set that to, actually we're going to set it to whatever their paint was. So we'll just put painting. And we're going to put some text in. So the text, once again, inherited from label. And we're going to make that equal to the rego. We'll set a size. Oop, that's not right. We'll make it about 100,30, see how that goes. We might have to change it. And we need to give it a location. Now, at the moment, what we'll do, so when you're doing location, you actually allocate a point. So it's a point on a Cartesian plane. And we just go point, open brackets, 1, 1. So we're just going to stick it at 1, 1. All right, so we've set up a timer, we've set up some label attributes, and we've also set up our properties. Now what we can do is we can look at our form and we can double click on our label here. And at the moment when we click the label, nothing happens. What we want to do is we want to create a car. So what we'll do is right up the top here, rather than put it in the method and it will only be available in this one method, we want it to be available to all methods. So we go car, there's my car, and then we just go semicolon, right? So we've created a variable called my car, type car, but we haven't actually instantiated it yet. We haven't created a class car yet. So that's what we do now. We can go my car equals new car, open bracket, and then we get prompted over here. We're prompted over here because of our constructor. Okay, so the constructor, it knows, asks for 3 parameters. So this is asking for 3 parameters, rego, paint, and update timer. So let's give it that. So rego is just a string. So we can just go AAA111 maybe. And we can go color dot red. And we can go new timer. And that should generate a car object. Once we've done that, if we run our application, nothing will happen, which you'll see in a minute. So we click on the button and nothing happens. And that's because we need to actually add this my car, which is a control now because it inherits labels. We need to add that to the form. So we can just go controls dot add. I have to spell it properly though. And we just go my car. And now when we run it, we click on button and our car appears, which is great. You can see it's got the rego number, it's red, it's rectangular, it's probably about 100 by 30 like we said. One thing I don't like is that it's right in the top left-hand corner, and you'll notice we did the location in the car by default was 1, 1. So you'll notice in WinForms that the plane is not like maths where you would normally have it in the top right, it's in the top left. So what we need to do is we need to basically, well, what we want to do is bring it down a little bit so it's not sitting right up in the corner. So we're going to add some to the Y aspect. So we'll go and change that. So we'll change the Y from 1 to maybe 100. We will stop that, run it again. On this, and now it's down here. So the next thing we'd be looking for is our timer, because ultimately we want this thing to move forward. And we look in our output and we can see there's no output, and there's a reason that there's no output, and that's because when we run the constructor and we set up this timer, it is enabled false, and so far nothing has set it to true. So what we want to do is when this button is clicked, apart from adding the control, we also want to set the timer on. So let's set that on as well. So my car dot, I think it was called update timer. Yep, update timer, wasn't it? Dot enabled equals true. And now what we should see is we should see some stuff starting to come out of the console. So we'll be looking up we'll be looking out down on our bottom right here. We click the button and there we go. We're getting ticked messages, okay? So that means now it is every 1 second, we know every 1 second that this thing here is running. So all we have to do now is put some code in here instead of just doing a console write line to actually change the location of the label. And that's actually quite easy. So what we're going to do is we're going to go new point new location equals location. So we're just going to get the old location. Actually, what we'll do is we'll go new point, open brackets, location dot x plus 10, comma, location dot y. Okay, so what does this all mean? We're basically creating a new point called new location, and we are going to allocate to that the old location, but add 10 to x. In other words, move it to the right by 10 points, and y should remain the same. Then what we do is we go location equals new location. So effectively we're saying jump 10 to the right. So now when we run this, what we should see when we click this button is we can see this thing starting to move to the right. Now it's moving pretty slowly and pretty roughly, and you can see it's still saying I ticked there. So this is all well and good. You can start playing with things like the interval. If you make it 200 milliseconds, you could change the distance that we move. So rather than 10, you could make it 5. That will make it smoother, right? So we're updating more frequently and make it smoother. Have a look at that. Click the button. You can see now it's starting to get smoother. Let's change it to even faster. So every 50 milliseconds. Click the button, and you can see it's starting to move fast and a lot smoother. So I think what we'll do is we'll leave this video here. We'll work on some other aspects to this. I think we'll add, rather than just adding 5, we'll probably add random numbers and stuff to that in the next video. But for now, you should be able to create a single label programmatically, put it up on the screen. It should represent a car, so it should have several attributes, and you should be able to make it move to the right. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you can follow it through. I will put links down in the description below to the GitHub source for this program, so you can copy and paste if you need to. I would strongly recommend that you don't, that you play the video in the background and slowly construct it yourself. You're going to learn a lot more by doing that than just wholesale copying and pasting, basically. But yeah, I'll leave you to it now to go and do a lot of experimenting and practicing. See you in the next video.